Good evening, everyone. It being 6:25 on Wednesday, May 14th, 2025, we'll begin our 7th budget hearing for the Committee of Ways and Means. Before we begin, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence for all those who serve in our military at home and abroad and for their families. Thank you. Clerk Semino, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilor Barrica?
Here.
Councilor Moran?
Here.
Councilor Flaherty?
Here.
Councilor Maglio? Is currently not here. Councilor Maglio? Here. Councilor Reynolds is currently not here. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have no approval of minutes this evening and no old business. As has been previously stated, the annual town meeting will be held on Tuesday, May 27th at 7 p.m. This is earlier than the council's normal start time. That will be a public hearing on the budget. If you have any questions between now and then, please email them to towncouncil@braintreema.gov. And again, I want to say thank you so much to our BCAM team for bringing our budget hearings to our entire community. Okay, so we can get underway now. Do we have a motion to take off the table Order 25018, 25020, and item 01625?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that is unanimous. This evening, the focus of our budget hearing will be our Braintree Public School System. I want to recognize and thank, as always, our Finance Director Mike Esmond, who's here with us every night, and also our team from Braintree Public Schools, Superintendent Lee, future Superintendent Tim McDonald, and Finance Director for the school, Sarah Kaufman. We also have District 4 Counselor Ann Quilty here this evening. So Superintendent Lee, would you like to make a statement or present anything to us before we begin the questions? Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for having us. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to come before you and explain a little bit about our budget, answer any questions that you might have. As you may know, what is being presented this evening is a level service budget, which would help us maintain all the programs and services we are currently delivering into next year. There are costs that do go up year to year, even to maintain those types of services. So as we discuss the increases that you'll see within the budget, they relate to those types of items that are necessary to keep what we presently have in a future tense. So when we look at our budget, we can see increased costs in special education. We can see increased costs in transportation. We had to renew a bus lease. That was an expense that we had anticipated, but it came to fruition for FY26. There are costs related to software that have gone up, and a few other sundry items that raise some of the amounts more than might be anticipated in a level services budget. Obviously, throughout the course of this school year, the district and the school committee have done a lot of work related to ways to become more efficient over time. In late April, it was decided by the school committee to pause that work so that they could entertain a master planning process for the school. I know that our department, working specifically with Mike Esmond, are in a position that we have requests for quotes out to have vendors who can come in and help consult on that particular work, so that in the longer term, I think efficiencies will be recognized for the community by the school system through that effort. So we look forward to that. Otherwise, we anticipate having a great, successful FY26 school year with all the programs that we presently have. We are in the midst of negotiations. Within this budget is an embedded 2% raise for salaries. I think the mayor mentioned that when she first presented the budget. So if you see that increase, at least you know where it's coming from. But other than that, I would like to thank Ms. Kaufman. She's done yeoman's work in terms of putting this budget together. and certainly the recognition of incoming superintendent, who's slyly in the back right now, but not for long, Tim McDonald. So with that, I'd be happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Lee. And before we open it up for questions, I do want to recognize and thank our, all of our Braintree Public Schools teachers and staff and administration. My 2 kids are Braintree Public Schools since age 3, and I know the incredible value that our schools bring to our community. And I also want to thank the work of our school committee, all volunteers who care deeply about our kids and our school system, and they have done the lion's share of the work on the school budget. The council does not have the authority to move any money around in the school budget, nor do we have any authority to add to the school budget. We are looking at the school budget as one figure. The school committee in the months leading up to this did all of that work, and it is all available in the public record, and I want to publicly thank the members of our school committee for that. Okay, so thank you for that introduction, and I will open it up to my colleagues on the council for questions. Who would like to start us off? Councillor Flaherty, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming forward. I know you've worked hard on this budget. The first question I have is, I received a communication today that there is a proposal to eliminate a science faculty position, and I wanted to ask if there was truth to that and if there could be some explanation for it, because we weren't expecting any eliminated positions in a maintenance of effort budget.
There's a modicum of truth to it. It is a conversation about shifting assets within the building. So it is not a reduction in a position. The question becomes, what would the purpose of that position be? There is some conversation ongoing, no decisions have been made yet, about increasing the number of business electives at the high school so that more students can access those elective offerings. We had a retirement in the science department, so that position presently is vacant. So the conversation really is about the most effective use of that existing position.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it would be the 3rd science position eliminated in the last 5 years, and it seems like beyond tragic that we have to choose between science and elaborate and expanding, you know, a popular business option. It should not be outside of Braintree's reach to be able to afford both of them. So I understand the difficulty of making those decisions, but it is extremely disheartening to have those kinds of decisions brought forth in the 1 year out of the next several years where the budget is meant to be whole. This budget is meant to be whole, but it is not really whole because it requires us to make choices that we should not have to make. Having said that, I will ask some, there is some mitigation planned for the schools in the sum of $200,000, which is in connection to the planning board's passage of the ZOM proposal. So it is my understanding that that money is not particularly earmarked for any particular program, but it's not clear to me how that funding, how the decision for that, the use of that funding is made. And who has the authority to decide how the funding will be used, and is it known yet how it will be used?
I actually don't have any information about that. My understanding was that there was some mitigation money coming. It was my understanding, without being part of any real conversation, that it was going into the sped stabilization fund that I believe you folks are looking at later this evening. But I honestly don't know that to be true. That's simply what I heard, so I've not been part of that conversation.
It wouldn't be in this budget because it was not finalized.
It is not in this budget.
Yeah, okay. Is there a way that we can find out how that decision gets made if nobody in the room has that answer tonight?
Director Esmond, does that?
Sure. I know we'll be discussing the motion the mayor filed related to the special purpose, special education stabilization fund later, and it's related. That the purpose of that fund and that those resources, should they go into that fund, are essentially to help provide in-year resources the school committee can work with the town to access to defray sometimes highly volatile, sometimes difficult to budget and forecast, really unbudgeted costs that happen in the middle of the year that would, in the absence of them, they would otherwise require potentially supplemental funding, or worse, the district having to make reductions in general education or other programs, or put off investments, et cetera, because many of those service costs are mandated and required. And so our community has not yet adopted this. We know that the special education costs that the district faces are a substantial part of their budget development in consideration in year sort of financial management every year. It's a big challenge. Braintree's not alone. This is we're probably, part of many other, one of many other communities right now looking at this as a solution to help bring more, stability to, within the fiscal year, and hopefully avoid, again, in-year challenges, unbudgeted items that are related to special education, essentially crowding out other costs, other investments that we're working to be able to fund and have predictability in funding this. So the resource that we're talking about in this case of the community mitigation would be used essentially the same as we have proposed, the $600,000 that would be proposed to be transferred in fiscal '26, essentially it would help also add to that amount and be available for the purposes I just outlined.
Right, okay, so I understand the purpose and the value of the stabilization fund, and I think we're going to discuss that later tonight in greater detail perhaps, but for the sake of transparency, when you have undesignated mitigation funding, who makes the decision about where to put that money towards?
Well, I think I probably would have to defer somewhat to the planning director on that. I think those are part of the negotiations that are between the applicant and the planning department specific to that.
Okay. I think just a legal opinion would be, maybe not a formal, just an answer, procedural answer on that would be helpful. Okay, so beyond that, I wanted to ask about student enrollment, because the student enrollment figures are printed, sorry? 211. On page 211, thank you. Okay, on 211 you have the student enrollment figures for 23 through 25, and then on another page it's extrapolated out farther. Right, on page 225. It goes to FY28. So when you look at FY24, we know there was 5,237, and FY25, we know there was 5,246. For FY26, which is coming very soon, we think that there's going to be 5,190, which are not significantly different numbers in any of those 3 years. Then we're projecting a measure of stability between now and 2028?
We are, yes.
Okay. So can you review how you identify, what those numbers you think are going to look like?
So today, in the school system, we have 5,320 students. So the numbers change on a daily basis.
Okay.
So we look at trends, and what we can count on overall is who is in a particular grade in that particular moment. So we know how many kids are in grade 2. So next year, we roll those kids over into grade 3. And what we have to account for is the 12th grade that is graduating, and the unknown is the incoming kindergarten or first grade class. So we make some projections on our own, given what we're seeing from a trend standpoint, and we then make some assumptions about what we think will happen over the next couple of years. As I mentioned earlier, part of the master planning process is a more fully vetted enrollment study that would take into deeper consideration developments around the town, ages of households around the town. There's, some other reports that you can view from communities that have done it that will take you out 10 to 15 years using better data than we can compile within the school department. So what you have from us is a projection based on what we see as a trend, what we know currently exists in the schools, and on average, how many kids are coming in and out in a given year from a transfer perspective.
Okay, so it's nice, it's helpful to think of your student population as stable. That helps us budget, so that's good news for us, because predictability is always good news for budgeting. As we look at the budget, one of the things that I've noticed is that generally speaking, our spending for the whole town, when you break it down into different categories, the projections are about a 3.5% increase every year from now through fiscal year 29. So if we had a 3.5% increase in spending over the course of those years, would that allow us to have a maintenance of effort, budget over, as we trend along? Would we be able to sustain that?
I don't believe so. This year's budget that is in front of you is over 4%, and that is level services. So as we look at ways to become more efficient, we are trying to close the gap to get us closer to that 3.5% year over year. So my quick answer to you is no. But it is the work in front of us. It is the work that we're engaged in with the town and working with Mr. Esmond to try to identify how we accomplish that. As I mentioned with my previous remarks, we're in the middle of a negotiation with all of our units, and that it will have a significant impact ultimately on what our budget numbers look like for FY26, FY27, and FY28. So we are cognizant of the 3.5%. We will work to try to get to that 3.5%, but presently we are over 3.5% to maintain level services.
Okay. As we look at the I wanted to talk a little bit about out-of-district tuition, because that has increased by 10%. And I'm wondering if you can, explain a little bit about why that cost has gone up so substantially, and what are the things that Braintree could consider doing to mitigate that? Because we do run into it pretty often.
What causes it are students whose needs and IEPs call for more services than we can presently deliver with the programs we have within the district. There's also tuition increases that come with out-of-district placements. I think I was before you last year talking about OSD's 14% increase to private schools tuition, which cost us about $600,000. The increases are less this year. I think Sarah knows better than I do. It's, I think, a little bit over 4%. Even with the collaboratives, it's over 3%. So those are baked-in increases regardless of how many students we're sending. But we do have a lot of kids presently who still need services that we do not have the programming for within the district, and so those kids do go out. We have a great number of programs within our school district to service a myriad of different needs that students have, and where it is cost-effective, or we believe it's cost-effective, we try to create programs to maintain those kids in district. It becomes increasingly challenging given the disability that you might be looking at, the needs of a particular student, and our ability to service them within a public school environment. So those are some of the challenges that go along with keeping kids in-house.
When we have we have the programs that we have, and I know that they're very strong because we have experience with them. Yep. But when do we take other communities, some of other communities' special needs students, and accept them into our programs? Do other communities pay us for tuition costs when we offer a service that is tailored to the needs of a student that lives in their community?
For the most part, no, is the answer to that. We have, to help other districts out, we have taken in a few kids into some of our programs on a tuition basis. but as a general practice, we do not do that. We maximize the utility of the programs that we have. We don't have a lot of capacity within the programs in-house that we could add tuition in students from other towns on any regular basis. So again, you know, where another district is really in need and we can be a good neighbor, if you will, we have done it, but it's rare. If not, it's so small as not to be relevant, quite frankly.
Okay. Those are my questions for now. Let me just think that through, and I'll get back to you.
Thank you.
Councilor Flaherty. Any other committee members like to entertain questions for the school department? Councilor Reynolds?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening. How are you?
I'm well, sir.
Mr. Superintendent. Good. Hi, how are you? I don't think we've met before, but it's a pleasure to meet you. All right, so just these are just my initial questions. School budget, understanding that to determine the exact number of students in an upcoming year, it's a moving target. It's can be a crapshoot sometimes, I'm sure. And with that, obviously, makes it even more difficult to ascertain what your overall needs are going to be in terms of money. So one of the things that would help me kind of understand a little bit better how you come to the budgets that you come to, those totals, how is the figure determined for the cost per student and per individual student in a school year?
Well, the cost per student is a function of our overall budget divided by the number of students that we have, typically based on an October 1 count. They take into consideration various elements in that. That's not how we budget, quite frankly.
Okay.
You know.
Can you, so it's been a little bit of mystery, and I want to understand.
Yep.
This is why I'm asking the questions. I want to understand. I think the school department overall has always done a very good job. Making the most with what you've got, right? And we all would like to have more, but the world we live in just doesn't allow us to do that. In particular, in these days, and some of my follow-on questions of trends that I'm seeing nationwide and across the state, I'd like to hear about what your thoughts are and how you're looking at them to mitigate these risks of funding going forward. So the cost per student, I see here, you know, you gave us some numbers for fiscal 20 through 23. So is it an after the fact, after the year completes is when you actually come up with that cost?
Correct.
Okay, so after that cost, and that again was, you just referenced October 1st of the most recent past year.
Right, so that's the official DESE designation of our school population in a given year.
Yeah.
It's called the October 1 count. So if you wanted to go onto the DESE website, they'll break it out by per pupil as well, but they're
Okay.
using typically the population based on October 1.
Okay, and then, so that number somehow must get determined in your calculations forecasting forward?
So as we forecast, we're more interested in how many students are we going to have in a given grade or at a given level, and do we have adequate teachers in place to have an effective class size, to offer the programs that we want to be able to offer, and to provide the supports that individual students might need. So when we look at elementary grades, for instance, we are looking at how many kids do we project are going to be in grade 3 at Hollis next year. And if we look and we can see that the average class size will be about 19, well, then we comfortably know that we can get more kids in there if they moved into town over the course of the summer.
Yep.
If we looked at another building where those numbers are pushing 24 or 25, we have to have a conversation about how many sections of that grade are we going to offer, because if more kids moved in, we could be looking at elementary class sizes of 26 or 27,
Right.
which is problematic. So we're projecting forward based on the students that we know. We're creating a buffer in our minds about the potential of kids moving in over the summer, which can be anywhere from 75 to 200 kids across the district that come into the district while another group of students is leaving the district. It is a very fluid population in general terms. And so we look at enrollment projections every single month. On the first of every month,
Okay.
we sit down with the numbers that we have on that day, see where we stand in terms of our ability to deliver the services that are necessary, to maintain the class sizes that we think are appropriate, and to make any adjustments on the fly in terms of what we have to do.
Okay, so really, you got to really pay attention to the trends, your historical data, I guess, is in a way that you could, best of your abilities, predict, right?
Correct.
So, and I would also assume, you made a statement that triggered a thought that obviously there's a different cost per student depending upon where they are between K and 12. And is it safe to assume that the higher level grade, the higher the cost?
I would not look at it that way.
No?
I think we deliver more direct services in the younger grades. Typically, as kids get older, they tend to mature. They might need less support. They might be able to work more independently as they get into the late middle and high school ages. And then obviously there's a transitional moment where they're going to move on to either furthering their education, the military, or a job. And so when I look at the elementary level, we're just getting those students for the first time. And we want to make sure that their initial experiences are very positive and that we're preparing them to be learners and preparing them to go through the educational process. And so a lot of those younger students come to us in very disparate places of readiness to learn. And so there's a lot of support at the elementary levels to make sure that we can get everybody kind of moving in the right direction and catching up where they need to and being challenged if that's where they're at.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. It helps formulate some of my, I guess, what I'm gathering when I'm reading the details, I'm reading the data of your budget. It kind of helps put things in perspective for me. One of the things that concerns me going forward and in the world and the way this country is today in terms of how the federal government works and how that trickle effect, like for the fact that the state today just made an announcement, the government made an announcement today that they had to put a hiring freeze in because one of the reasons, the main reason was the economic outlooks and that we're not making our revenue targets. And this has been consistent for the last few years. And now on top of that, you add to a federal government that has a mindset of cutting aid, and particularly the education department, right? So you give us a figure here in the binder of how much state and federal grant money you get every year. And that money has been trickling off. It's going in the wrong direction, right? Do you anticipate, is there any concrete evidence or any larger concerns that might become reality for you with these grants perhaps coming in significantly less?
Yes, is the answer, particularly the federal grants that we receive. We receive title grants and special education grants. The trend, to your point, has been the lowering of those figures. More recently, the talk is about maintaining Title I, which is a low-income grant in special education. There's been no talk about Title III or Title IV, which is monies that we receive. Were that money to dry up, we would have to identify other ways that we could support the programming that we pay for through those types of grants. If the state finds itself in a difficult financial situation based on any federal grants that they receive, would that trickle down to this, our school system through the town and the support the state might provide Braintree? So it's all a concern. Right now, we don't see it coming to fruition in the moment, but we are anticipating that it might not be great in a little while.
Okay, and these Title I programs, 3, et cetera, are they mandates?
Well, no, because if we didn't get the money, we wouldn't run the program. So,
Okay.
we do receive Title I funding, and we get a significant amount. And we have a number of our staff people are paid for through the Title I
Right.
grant. And again, presently, the federal government has said that they would not look to cut that. However, if they did, we'd have to reduce our staff by probably
Maybe
that
the
number,
question would be
right?
better asked is, that money used toward mandated programs, like by the state or by the feds?
I can make an argument that some of Title III is mandated in terms of the English language learning programs that we have to offer, the supports we have to offer those students. Again, we pay for some of that through the Title III grant.
Yeah.
We pay for it through the operating budget as well. But it would have an impact. It would have an impact on the overall budget.
Right, and you know, I certainly, as a very pro-advocate for public education, and I want to see public education maintain, if not ideally, improve, and we need money to do that, right? And then we do know there's a lot of mandates out there, and I don't know if this is just more of an opinion that I'm expressing to you, but that we want to do those types of things, and if these programs aren't getting funded, we're in a really deep hole. We're in a really, really deep hole.
Yeah, I think you're preaching to the choir. You know, I think you look at some of the other proposals that are being described at the federal level, it's a relatively scary time to be in education and to want to see kids educated to the fullest of their potential in an environment that might not support that idea. So, you know, we'll continue to work within whatever means that we have and put forward the best program that we can in any given moment. But I think everybody needs to watch what's happening because there is the potential of us losing resources because Braintree lost resources or the federal government didn't support it the way they had in the past.
Right, and that's a very good piece of advice. People need to watch that. They need to understand that. That is all I have just for the moment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Reynolds. Councilor Maglio.
Thank you. Hello. Hello. I have a quick question, and it's about the master plan, which you may not be in a position to talk about tonight, but I just noticed that there is on one of the pages here, there's a footnote about the $500,000 for carrying out that plan. Is there an idea of what those expenses are going to be, or like what is the reason for that amount?
I might ask Mike Esmond to address that question.
So I think, Counselor, the footnote you're talking about is on, sorry.
I can find it.
222, I think.
222, yep.
222, okay. Thank you. So that footnote's intended to do is call out that the distinction between the 82,789,000 that Jim and Sarah are talking about today as far as the level of service budget and the filed budget in the filed funding level in the mayor's budget, which is 82, essentially it's $500,000 less, so 82.3 million, sorry, that's listed here. The $500,000 that's referenced in this footnote is actually funding that we're proposing transferring from a fiscal 25 reserve into 26 for the schools, which will primarily be used for the schools for their operations. The 82.3 represents the 3.5% growth target that was first filed. We first noted it when the mayor filed her fiscal 25 budget, and we have continued that target in fiscal 26, 7, and 28 and 29 in our forecasts. As Jim noted, the school district's maintenance budget totaled over 4%, just about 4%. So the delta there is funded. The solution that the district was looking at to be able to meet that 3.5 target, they were working to do that, was associated with the school consolidation proposal that had been worked on last fall into the winter. The master plan, the funding for the master plan would not come from this $500,000. We are as Jim alluded to, we're in the process of writing a procurement for that master plan to be published. We don't yet know what the price will be. It wouldn't be funded in the school district's budget. That would be considered by the council and what the mayor's filed. We would seek resources separate from that. So the school district won't be asked to fund within its operations that. The $500,000 is intended to bridge the school district's operations to make sure that we can support level funding, maintenance of effort funding in fiscal 26 as the master planning conversations continue to proceed.
Okay, I get that. So that it's sort of a very small buffer.
small, but it makes, I mean, because they're,
It's a 0.5%.
it's 0.5%, and there was some discussion within the district and regarding the budget when we came to what else would have to be done. There is no, there really wasn't a lot of cushion for them, and so that's when we start, I think that was one of the big sort of, points of emphasis when the mayor announced that she would seek to provide this reserve funding into fiscal '26 with the council's support, knowing that we had some more work to do to continue to look at the options. I think, we talked a little bit earlier on Monday about our concerns about the condition of the facilities and the investments that are going to need to be put into these facilities, as well as the challenges on the school district and other operating budgets. So this is, it is small, but the consequences if the district had to absorb the 500,000 would be, it would be substantial to the point that it would affect personnel, most likely.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's just the way that it's written or the way that it's phrased is it could be interpreted in the way that you just described or in the way that I did on my own, which was somehow it's related to the master planning project. But it makes perfect sense now that you've mentioned it. So, okay, that's it for me for right now. Thank you.
Counselor Moran?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike, I'm going to be following up on questioning of that procurement because I want to make sure that the council has heard about how that RFP for a master plan that may result in consolidations is worded so that it does not preclude the fact that the majority of Braintree residents prefer neighborhood schools and prefer maintenance of them.
Sure. So thanks, Counselor. I think one thing to note is the work that was done as part of the Sanborn work that was done as the consultant is absolutely going to be a part of the information, but there is a larger visioning objective here. And I think that is, one of the biggest goals that, of the mayors is to engage the residents, engage the community exactly for that, to discuss the trade-offs, because that's really to your question directly. I think that's exactly the point, is to try to make sure that folks are understanding in that preference or what that means as far as any number of considerations, establishing where we are going with, we spoke about demographics and enrollment. We'll be looking to get a projection that accounts for development, goes out for 10 years. We are looking at following up on some of the work that was done last fall by a consultancy that looked at some of the allocation and resource challenges that the district has been living with in the ability to implement programs. And one of the findings that the district had, one of the findings that consultant had is that the cost per student with 6 K through 4 programs, K through 4 schools, is higher because there's a degree of redundancy, if you want to call it that, in operating 6 regional or 6 neighborhood schools. But those are community choices, and I think that's ultimately, this will give us the ability to make sure that we're sort of putting all of that in one sort of platform of consideration, if you want to call it that. That's the objective. It's not a foregone conclusion by any means. There's some information that probably needs to be refreshed. I think we're trying to balance the work and cost that will be an investment that will be required if we did a full facilities condition study, which we've done in the past, versus trying to get more of the outcome of engaging the community and looking at the visioning concept and looking at what the options are going to be, to address some of these facility physical condition challenges, as well as the program challenges that you have in the resource allocations. So long-winded answer, I apologize to that, but it's not a foregone conclusion by any means. I think we're looking to ensure that hours are put forward and a work plan is put forward by whoever is awarded this, the team that's awarded this engagement, to ensure that they're engaging the community, They're engaging the leadership teams, they're engaging the staff, and they're engaging with the professionals who we've hired to be able to, make the assessments of not just like as I said, the physical limitations, but also the programmatic limitations potentially. And the other piece of this is also to look at the financing. It's not to be missed. We've only had really one conversation that was focused with MSBA. I think we will continue. But that is another consideration of what future funding partnerships we could get and what are the realities of that as well.
Okay. There's going to be, regardless of what option or direction the town chooses, there's going to have to be significant investment either way. I just want to make sure that this council, who is going to be asked to appropriate the money for this study, has the opportunity to be heard about what we're asking the study to be, so that it is not turned into, or it is not steered in a particular direction that the mayor may prefer over what I believe the majority of the town prefers. And I want to make sure that prior to the issuance of any RFP, that the council has input into the drafting of that. Thank you for your explanation. So Superintendent Lee, I just want to say I am in full support of this budget. My questions are going to be to clarify, or just some questions I have about where money is spent, and just to make sure that I understand the changes over the years to certain line items in this budget, to clarify for the public where money has been invested, and I think it has been invested well. So I am going to be referring to, on our budget book, both pages 222 and 226, but in different time periods. In FY22, under the line item for teachers, in the regular education day expenditures, the budget amount was $30,458,452. In looking at what we are asking and proposing, and what I think the council will wholeheartedly support, the proposed budget for teachers is $44,963,708. That represents a 47.6% increase over that period of time in investment into teachers by the town of Braintree. So I want it to be clear, because I think a budget is a clear expression of what a municipality or a town or a city's priorities are. And I think Braintree has spoken loudly that they support education and they support funding teachers. And I want people to know that this figure, 47.6%, is roughly double what the town budget as a whole increased in that time, even when it incorporated this increase. That we as a council, that the council made education a priority overall in comparison to other areas. We did invest in other things, but we grew the amount we invested into our educators faster than nearly anything else we put money into. And I think that's a good thing, and it should be pointed out. It is also double the rate that the administrative budget for day education grew at the same time. So if there is information that is being put out there that the town has not invested in its teachers, I would respectfully disagree, because if one looks at the difference in spending from FY23 to what is being proposed in FY26, it demonstrates that the town has invested its money well into the education of its children. So turning to a couple of areas that I have, just it's more curiosity than anything else. You still have money in a maintenance budget. Where does maintenance, now that facilities has taken the personnel and much of the role away, what does that line entail?
Which line are you looking at? Which line?
It's the operations and maintenance budget. I just want to know what that entails, since facilities has absorbed a lot of the former money. It used to be about 5 million, and now it's down at about 1, and I'm just wondering what that 1 million encompasses.
Much of it is phone systems. It is still embedded in that line. There may be some other small
Would that be
pieces.
where security would be, things like that? You know, alarm systems?
Well, the technology related to things like security,
Okay.
yes. Also the technology related to some other elements of what we do as well.
Okay. And my last area that I'm interested in is transportation. It seems to be a stressor for a number of communities. You are leasing vehicles now
That's correct.
rather than owning. And how did you come to that decision, and what kind of savings or cost reductions do you realize by not owning?
So the rationale behind it is the potential maintenance costs as the buses get older. So for instance, presently, we're using buses that we re-leased because we first procured them during COVID. And so now we're beginning to see many of the buses beginning to fail in certain mechanical aspects, increasing the maintenance cost of keeping those buses up and running. So similar to an individual leasing a car, it's to go back in time to have something newer that's less prone to break down and more reliable, so that we have a bus maintenance person of one to maintain a fleet well over 40 vehicles. So having those that we can rely on, we believe is cost effective over time. So in terms of the actual savings, I'd have to get back to you with some more concrete numbers. I don't want to just suppose
But
figures
when
for
you
you.
when you made that decision, it was driven by cost.
Correct. Exactly what I just described.
Okay, and is storage of buses or finding a place to store the buses still a challenge?
We rent the facilities on Adams Street, and that is where they are stored. We've just negotiated an upkeep of that lease, so right now we will stay there.
Okay.
It has worked for us, and I see it working for us for the next several years as well.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Superintendent, and best wishes in your retirement.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Counselor Moran. I'm going to let everyone go for a second time if they like, but if my colleagues don't mind, I have a few follow-up questions. Okay, I would like to start on page 212 of the budget book, and Counselor Reynolds touched on this, the federal and state grant funding table. So my first question is FY21 and FY22, do those include the ARPA and the other COVID pandemic funding
The ESSER
one-time
monies
sources?
that we received?
Because that's why they're higher?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
exactly. Yep.
And then for this year, we are budgeting, and correct me if I'm wrong, if this is not included in the budget, but we're budgeting 2.9 million in state and federal grants. And how much of that is state and how much of that is federal?
That number would be almost entirely federal.
Okay, and the total received is pending. Is that typically that we wouldn't have received that money at this time per year, or are we concerned? Okay, so what's your confidence level given the uncertainty at the federal level that?
So typically, we'd get those numbers as the summer begins,
Okay.
late June, July. So there's no reason to panic
Okay.
in any sense at this point in time.
And when are those dollars committed typically? Like, have we been in touch with our federal delegation that we're securing $3 million is a giant portion of this
It is a
budget?
lot, and the answer about the federal delegation is no. The communications coming out of the federal government presently are maintenance of Title I, maintenance of the SPED budget. Those are our two big ones.
And that's the 2.9?
That's federal money that represents most of the 2.9.
Okay,
The Title III grants, the Title IV grants, some of the other smaller grants are much lower in amount. So our biggest concern would be Title I and special education. And again, at this point, they've committed to not touching those. So again, we're not panicking at this point in time. Quite frankly, I'd be more concerned about FY '27, watching the trends in terms of the federal government's outlook on education in general, to
Yep.
kind of echo Mr. Reynolds' points. For FY '26, I think we're in a pretty good position.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I would also like to go back to the 500,000 and make sure everybody's clear here. So, or I'm clear. Other people might be. The mayor's filed budget for the school department is 82.3 million.
Correct.
But the budget request from the school committee is 82.7 million?
Correct.
Okay. So is there an anticipation that there will be an amendment to the filed budget before we vote on it on the 27th?
No, no, Counselor. If you were to look at the motions that were filed in the mayor's budget, there's a motion to transfer $500,000 from the 25 payroll restructuring reserve. And if you've indulged me, I'm just by way of quick recap.
Please remind me where this is coming from.
Is the word I'm trying to recall here. At the conclusion of the budget development process, when we filed fiscal '25, we anticipated a substantial number of costs that we would incur as a result of the larger payroll reductions we are looking at. So that would be just the cost of separations, not just in the school side, but also in town side.
Right.
Those costs went down for two main reasons. One is that with the override, they were not as substantial, and secondarily, we haven't seen as much utilization, specifically in unemployment costs, for example. So we have the bulk of that reserve is still available. What we are proposing is to take $500,000 of that reserve in fiscal '26 and transfer it to the general fund, the school's general fund budget for that. Most of that, in full transparency, will be to support ongoing operations. There's probably a small number of one-time items that we could link to, but that's essentially that number was identified because that essentially tracks to the savings that would have otherwise been generated for the district if we had moved forward with one of the options in the consolidation consideration.
So that's just something to consider that but what's the total in that fund?
Right now, we have only expended, we've only expended about, I think roughly between 300 and 400,000. We just recently transferred 248,000 in fiscal '25 to the school district to support one-time expenses that they have identified, and that was going back to the mayor's sort of original pledge with fiscal '25 that she would work with the district to make up to 500,000 available in this fiscal year to support one-time expenses. We've only needed to transfer about 250 of that 500,000. So next year we would essentially be adding another 250,000 to that original $500,000 commitment.
So are we transferring 250,000 or 500,000?
Next year, 500,000.
Okay. How much is in the fund today?
About, I would say roughly about, I didn't get your exact number, but let's say for round numbers, 1.1 million.
Okay, so we're taking, when we talk about trade-offs, to your point earlier, Director Esmond, and to Councilor Moran's point, I just want everyone to be clear. We're taking money from our reserves to make ourselves whole for the schools, which I fully support, because we made a choice not to close or consolidate schools this year, which now we also have to maintain, and we just heard last week, or maybe it was yesterday or Monday, that the cost of maintaining 50, 75, 100-plus-year-old schools is inefficient and exorbitant. So again, I just want to make sure that we're clear on the trade-offs that we're making as we have to make really, really tough decisions in every single aspect across our community, and we all have to make concessions. Because that's a lot of money. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. Staying on page 222, I don't know if this is for Ms. Kaufman, you, or Mr. Esmond. The operations and maintenance line this year is increasing by almost 19%. It's 1% of the total budget, so I want to look at the total pie here. It's only 1% of the total budget, but it's increasing by 19%. So that seems a little out of whack to me, but could you speak to if this is typical, expected?
It's not typical and it's not unexpected. So
Okay.
this category of operations and maintenance includes software. So this year
Okay.
and last year, we completed a few different grant-funded projects. For example, we added cameras on our buses. So that's a good example. We added some cameras at the high school as well. Those came with small software costs that were initially covered by the grant and now are being folded into our operating budget.
Okay,
So
all right.
that's that increase. So it's sort of like a one-time increase, but then we'll be in the budget going forward
Got
for
it.
as long as we have those.
Thank you for clarifying that. And then on the out-of-district placements, or out-of-district expenditures, that represents 5% of the total budget, which is demonstrated on the pie chart on page 223. Is that like on par with other districts in the state?
I would suggest it's close.
Okay,
Is it exactly, the state average? No, I think we might be slightly higher than the state average, but
it's not way out of line with the state
I don't believe it's way
average?
out of line.
Okay. Again, I'm just trying to level, get a baseline for expectations for some of these critical costs. Okay, thank you for that. I think that got answered. Okay, that is all I have for the minute. Counselor Flower, did you have follow-up?
I do. So I'm going to return to this idea of what's going to happen with the budget going down the line, because at the very beginning of this process, we were given information about what to expect in the coming years. And I think it's important to start that conversation now because this community still is in the point where we have to make hard choices. So the way that funding is projected out offers 3.5% increase to the schools every year for the next 3 years. And what you said in the last time before we stopped this particular conversation was it was 4% this year, and you don't really anticipate being able to cover the current needs with a 3.5% increase in years down the line. Okay, so in FY27, our operating revenues are projected to, a gap starts to open up. And in FY27, it's only $230,000. But in FY28, it's $2.1 million, and in FY29, it's $4.2 million. So the projection of a 3.5% increase annually doesn't get met if those numbers come to fruition, which is what we would expect if nothing else changes in terms of our revenues. So the question that I have to ask is if everything holds steady, if our student population holds steady and we don't make any changes as far as our buildings are concerned, then when we begin to meet this deficit and our ability to reach a maintenance of effort school budget begins to drop, what should residents expect as far as where those cuts would lie? And I recognize that that's speculative, but I think in fairness to residents who are consistently confronted with this decision over and over and over again when they're asked to support this revenue stream or that, they need to have an idea of what the playing field would look like. And I also want to recognize that you're not going to be the person who's charged with making those decisions. So if Mr. McDonald would like to weigh in on this, that is totally fine with me.
I'm going to spare him that
Okay.
for this evening. we will meet any number that the town can afford, but the impact on programming and staffing may be significant. So there's time to make some adjustments to change things. You hear about the master plan, you hear about other studies that we've been doing. All of this is an effort to become as efficient as possible to maximize the utility of the resources the community provides. If the community is unable to provide enough to maintain services, we would begin a process of identifying cuts that we believe have the least impact on student learning and safety. And so there'd be teaching cuts. There would. Depending upon the circumstances, there could be program cuts. You know, when we sat in this room, I think it was 2 years ago, it seems like forever ago, we were talking about 90 some odd positions potentially being reduced. Even at that number, we were attempting to maintain all the programs that we had: music, art, physical education, things that we deem as important and want to maintain in some capacity. But there's still an impact. There's an increase to class sizes. There is a stretching of our teaching staff to a point where it might be unreasonable for them to perform their duties in a way that they would take pride in because it's just overwhelming. So we would look in the moment, whatever that moment is, about how do we make reductions to have the least amount of impact on students and families. And it would be a public conversation, just like last year was around the 90 cuts and ultimately the override. Our job is to tell people exactly what could happen, where we see the cuts coming, what we see the amount necessary to close the gap might be, and how we're going to get there. And again, if the community is unable to afford it, we will make those cuts. So I think it's important to keep everybody informed in terms of where the budget process lies at any point in time, not just for FY27, but for FY28 and beyond. And if it happens to be that the community is not in a position to fund what amounts to a level service budget, to be transparent about what the cuts will actually be. But it is speculative, and things do change. So Mr. McDonald, comfortably sitting in the back right now, would be in a position at that point in time, working with all the members of his administration to come up with the best ideas possible, to bring them to the school committee, to the town council, and beyond.
Okay, thank you. No.
Thank you. I have a question about the teachers and the teacher contracts. Are they in the third year, or are they currently in the first year without a contract?
They're currently in the third year of their contract. Their contract will expire August 30th.
August 30th. And some sort of negotiations have already started?
I believe we've had 7 sessions already.
7.
Yep, and we continue that work.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Councilor Reynolds.
I'm glad that the chairwoman had brought up the topic on the operations and maintenance, and thank you for that explanation. Absolutely support this budget. Just from another point of clarity, I'd ask, in the operations area, you did talk about what contributed to the size of the increase. What are some of the other areas that you fall under operations?
Under operations and
Yeah.
maintenance? Again, I believe the phone system is in there, but for the most part, it is software and things of that nature, and the technology department as a whole.
Technology as a whole,
Yep.
okay. What about your security items? Where do they fall? School security, security programs, things of that nature.
So the software is in that line that you're discussing. The security personnel, however, I don't believe is there. Do you know where that? We want to confirm that. So we have a limited security staff at the high school. They may be in that line, but we'll get back to you. I just don't want to give you inaccurate information.
All right. Well, thank you. And just on the topic of security, I think you had given us you had given the council a briefing within the last year, I believe, on, I think there was a grant that was received.
Yep.
And does that get reflected in your budget, or is that something that's going to be presented separately? or is carried somewhere else.
So as Ms. Kaufman explained, the initial expenditures largely came out of a grant. So in that grant, there were extra cameras at the high school, there were door alarms at all of our elementary schools, there are the RFID cards for students getting on and off buses that are set to go next year. As those grants get expended, some of the software costs that are ongoing, just think of all the licenses that you pay for in life.
Right.
They now move into the operating budget, and you can see them reflected in that line.
So we should anticipate that we will, when this grant is expired, should anticipate that we're not going to do away with the programming, but rather maintain it. It's just another consideration. when we have
Correct.
to
So
budget
a
for
lot of what the grant provided was the hardware, which is not a one-time expense, sadly, but in the moment, it's a one-time expense.
Sure.
But that ongoing software license and things that are necessary to continue the program running are going to be part of our ongoing budget.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor Reynolds. Counselor Moore, did you have a second time? Okay. I do have one clarification, I think, Director Esmond, for you. The healthcare and other benefits, that continues to fall in not within the town, not within the school departments, within this 82.7.8 million, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Again, I just want to make sure people are clear that in addition to the salaries, rightfully so, but they're not reflected in the school budget, are the costs for healthcare and other benefits provided for our town staff at the schools and otherwise.
Correct. Yeah, I think it's probably something we noted, maybe I think the mayor noted it in her comments. If you account for healthcare, pensions, debt service, the things that you see sort of as represented in fixed costs, some of it appropriated HR, finance, for example, centrally, if you add up sort of the school allocation in addition to the direct funding, the direct appropriation, town total spending in our operating budget is 62% of our expenses in fiscal '26.
For the school department.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And then I do have a short statement I'd like to read, and I do want to say it is true, and Councilor Moore, and thank you for pointing it out. We have invested continually in our school system forever, right? But it is simply not enough, and Braintree families are bearing the brunt, because one thing that is not covered in the budget is fees. And I want to just take a moment and ask my colleagues to indulge me. Picture a family on your street. 2 parents, 3 kids, a kindergartner, a 5th grader, and a 9th grader. They don't live within walking distance of the school, so the children take the bus. The kindergartner also needs after-school care. It's only 5, maybe 6. The 9th grader is a 3-season athlete, like many of them. And on top of after-school care, winter coats, backpacks, school supplies, this family must also, alone, bear the cost of full-day kindergarten at nearly $3,800. Bus fees, $720. And for the high schooler who plays soccer, basketball, and runs track, $2,400. This adds up to $7,000 for one family with 3 children in a public school system. These school fees are nothing more than a de facto tax shouldered solely and completely by Braintree families. And in my opinion, this is a violation of the social contract, of what it means to live in a community. Because whether you have children in the public schools or not, the benefits of public education are reaped by the entire community. And just as the benefits are shared, so should the costs. In Braintree, we take pride in saying we are a community for all kinds of families. But it's more important for us to demonstrate that we are a community that cares for all kinds of families. And nowhere can we demonstrate this more than the funding we put into our schools. As we move ahead in the coming months and years, I call on all of us to embrace new ideas and change. We must make concessions and compromises because the status quo does not reflect our values. A changing and growing community is a sign of prosperity, and it's a tangible signal that Braintree goes beyond saying we're for families by showing we're for families. Thank you. Any other questions for the school department? I just called you counselor. Our town auditor, Sean McGoldrick, go right ahead, and thank you. Mr. Superintendent Lee, do you mind repeting that? Because I don't think Sean's
The
mic
question
was
is,
working.
what was the balance of circuit breaker that we're anticipating moving into FY
Thank you.
'26? I'm going to ask Ms. Kaufman to answer.
That's a good question. Not a lot, but we're hoping maybe like 200,000.
For fiscal year '26?
Fiscal '26, it's a Article 2 reserve, Fund 2 Article Reserve.
Mr. McGoldrick's mic was off, I think.
We're good now.
So the motion would be, to transfer that directly in from Fund 2 to Fund, to Fund 3. Sorry.
But a fiscal year '26 appropriation from Fund 1 to Fund 3, or a fiscal year '25 appropriation from Fund 1 to?
Right now, I'm anticipating it in fiscal '26.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anything else, Mr. McGoldrick?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. If there's no further questions on the school budget, we can move on to, oh, I'm sorry, we do have 2 revolving funds. Speaking of fees, full-day kindergarten and the school bus fund. Any questions on those? Counselor Maglio, go right ahead.
I have a question about the kindergarten, the full-day kindergarten. Can you explain what that is? The full-day, I'm sorry, where is my list here? The full-day kindergarten, I think it's $1 million.
1.1.
1.1?
So that money is the money that we collect for the full-day kindergarten fees that Councilor Barker mentioned. It goes to pay salaries for kindergarten teachers.
So you collect that in fees, that's not an appropriation?
Correct, that's the money collected in fees.
Okay, I got a little thrill when I saw that.
Sorry.
And thought maybe something had changed at the state. Okay.
Thank you, Counselor. All right. We will move on to 25024, Mayor, establish special education, special purpose stabilization fund or take up any action relative thereto. Director Esmond or Superintendent Lee or Ms. Kaufman, I know we've touched on this briefly, but would you like to provide any additional explanation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just very briefly, because I'll just recap the points I made earlier. The motion that's in front of you was discussed in a number of forums. I think latest in the mayor's remarks on fiscal '26. It essentially is a vehicle that we would ask you to support. We would fund in fiscal '26 through a transfer of $600,000 to this fund, and we would be using it to essentially, should there be unbudgeted costs that are not accounted for, are not in the school district's budget in any given year, associated with the eligible expenses that are contemplated related to special education, we would We would have this fund, this would be available. It would still be subject to the mayor needing to file and town council acting upon that request for transfer of funds. But essentially, as I said, it would serve as a reserve in any given year to allow the school district to not have to essentially make mid-year course corrections in their budget to potentially have to offset unanticipated, unbudgeted costs that occur relatively routinely in any fiscal year. And again, I just want to emphasize that there are a number of other communities have employed this as a way to try to ensure they can preserve as best possible the budgets that are adopted in any given year. You may, if folks had watched, and I guess I could let Sarah and Jim talk more about this, but historically, in absence of this reserve, the district has to sort of budget for what they think could potentially be that exposure. So I think it was $300,000 in fiscal '26. It may not materialize. I wouldn't know for sure, but there's a very reasonable chance that it could. I think there are probably some pieces that we will need to figure out down the road, specific to how we recapitalize this if we do use funds from year to year. But we think this is demonstrating a better practice to account for the costs that we know are very reasonable to occur and to help protect preserve the funding in the operating budget as best possible in the schools, the district's budget, again, for any in-year challenges.
Thank you. Counselors, committee members, questions? I have a question. I'm sorry if you said this, Director Osmond. We're putting $600,000 into this fund? And where is that $600,000 coming from?
So in the mayor's budget proposal, what we're proposing to do is transfer $600,000 from the general fund for this. We would, as a way to pay for that, we're proposing a corresponding transfer from currently in our sale of a real estate fund, which has the balance of the funds from the Allen Street property sale. So that's about $1.2 million. So this would be roughly half of it would be booked as a general fund revenue, but then we would be able to transfer $600,000. So we need to make sure that any funds that come from the real estate trust are earmarked or preserved, and you'll see in the wording of the motion specifically for debt service or the acquisition of real estate. So this would be in the case of debt service, hence the wording. But it is essentially can serve as a revenue in the sense that it serves in this case as a way to provide additional resources, which we then could transfer to capitalize this new trust, the new fund in '26.
Thank you. I think this is a really prudent and smart thing to do. I'm in full support of this. I don't know, Sean, did you have any questions while you're here for this? Okay.
Nope.
Anybody else? Councilor Moran?
Yes, I'm pleased to see that this is being done, and I think just for illustrative purposes, there was a point several years ago where, it was probably 3 years ago, where an increase in the amount of pay for the workers that provide care to special education students was passed by the state for about 14% increase that was passed on to the vendors who provide the special education services with no concurrent increase in SPED funding for the state. So what was actually passed on to communities was a 14% increase to bear. This kind of a stabilization fund can smooth those unforeseen or new costs, and I think this is a prudent way it's a prudent way of budgeting for those unforeseen occasions, as well as when you may have a new student come in that's unanticipated with severe needs, things like that. This helps address those kind of unforeseen events, and I'm fully supportive of it.
Counselor Moran. All right, if there's no other questions, do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I would move that town council vote pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 5B, to create a special purpose stabilization fund for unbudgeted, unforeseen special education costs to be known as the Special Education Special Purpose Stabilization Fund.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, if there are no, actually, before we make a motion to table, I do just want to ask counselors here, committee members, if they're anticipating any callbacks for next week. If you are still thinking about it or think we need further clarification and don't have the answer tonight, please reach out to Sue tomorrow, just for, in terms of posting. And Counselor Maglio, go ahead.
I'm still thinking about it.
Okay.
There was some business I was going to tie up today that I just didn't get to, which I will tomorrow, and we will see if
No problem.
that's all right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and again, also, if we have outstanding questions that have been asked that you're still waiting on answers for, please send Sue reminder emails. We do like to have the paper trail for our records on that. Okay. Any further discussion on the budget tonight? All right. In that case, do we have a motion to table Order 25018? I'm sorry, go ahead, Counselor.
I'm so sorry,
Nope, that's
Counselor.
right.
Today's Wednesday, right?
Yes.
Okay, so tonight is our last, no,
No, we have Monday.
we have Monday, but it's our last for this week. We have Monday. Could I ask before we adjourn?
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Take your time.
What we have scheduled for Monday? Oh, golf, okay.
Municipal finance
Enterprise and municipal, okay.
and law, yep.
Okay. I would just like to say that every night that we've been here, it's really just been us and the people who work for the town, who are putting forward a budget. And last night, including last night, we were upstairs so that the large room could be used to hear plans for a development. And it's really striking to me that so many people come out in support or against, and it tends to be a lot against a development, but we're not really seeing them coming to budget hearings. And this is really important because this is the engine that drives everything in the town. And in order to have a police department that's robust and a fire department that is full of safety and supports, and a DPW that can get to the sidewalks, and stormwater, and all of these different functions, it requires really creative, innovative growth. And I would love to see more people, any people, coming to the budget meetings and asking questions and putting us through paces, rather than saying, we don't have any money because it's all being mismanaged. That is really tedious to listen to over and over again. And so I know I always check the views, and I know there are some of you at home, like me, that you're watching when you can't be there in person, when I watch the other meetings. But 70 views, 40 views, 80 views, when I know probably 20 of them are mine, there's a bit of an imbalance there, and I would encourage everyone to try and plug in a little bit more and get a little bit more of the details before just assuming that we're broke because somebody's on the take somewhere. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there. Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other remarks? Okay. With that, do we have a motion to table Order 25018 25019, 25020, zero. Okay, I didn't think we took that off the table. All right, so moved. We have a motion?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that is tabled. As Councilor Maglio mentioned, our next budget hearing will commence on Monday, May 19th, 2025 at 6:15 PM. Thank you so much to the school department and our faithful finance director, Mike Esmond, who's here with us every single night as well. And I also want to thank our town auditor, Sean McGoldrick, and of course, BCAM for televising and keeping this all in the public eye and on the public record. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.